All right, number 1 is asking for range. We know that range is y, so we're going to squish this to our y-axis. This dot comes over and fills in at 7. This dot comes over at -4. But when we start to bring this one over, we see it's an arrow. So this line is going to go from the top. It's not going to stop at this dot. It's an arrow. It keeps going forever. So we're using all numbers from 7 and below, 7 and down. So we want the answer to say y is less than or equal to 7. So the answer choice that matches there is A. Y is less than or equal to. If you got confused by D with these symbols, that's just saying it can go from negative infinity to positive infinity. That's another way of just saying all real numbers, which is the phrase we use in class. All right, number 2 asks for rate of change. We know that rate of change is slope. So all we have to do is find slope from this graph. We go from here up to here. So that's up 1, 2, but we know it's not just going by 2. We look at the axis. If this is 20, halfway between 20 and 0 is 10. So it's going by 10s, 10, 20, 30. So it went up and then over. How far did it go up? It went from 10 to 30, which is clearly plus 20. It went up 20. So in my y, it was 20 up, and then I went over. We see here's 40, here's 0. Halfway between 40 and 0 is 20. From 20, 40, this would be 60. So how far over did it go? From 20 to 60 is 40. So that's 20 over 40, which reduces to 1/2. The answer choice that matches 1/2 is obviously J, 0.5 per candle. All right. On the next page, we have number 3. What is the 0? We know 0 is another word for x-intercept. So in the graph, we simply look for where the line crosses the x-axis, which is at 4. The answer is 4. Should have been the easiest question on the test. On the next question, we're solving the equation for C. We see parentheses, so we're going to distribute. 2 times C is 2C. 2 times -12 is -24. 0.5C minus 3 equals, we brought everything else down. We have C's on both sides, and we don't want to have C's on both sides. We need to get them all to the same side. So we're going to get rid of this 0.5C by going minus 0.5C, minus 0.5C. These are gone. -3 is equal to 1.5C minus 24. We still want the C on its own, so we need to get rid of the 24, plus 24, plus 24. 21 equals 1.5C. Last step, when you want the C on its own, that 1.5 is multiplying to the C. So to get rid of it, we divide by 1.5, divide by 1.5. C is equal to 14. That's the answer. On the next question, number 5, asks for which of these graphs has a domain, which is x, of x is greater than 6, and a range, which is y, of y is less than 4. So we look at the graphs. If I bring this up to my x-axis and bring this down to the x-axis, this is everything from 6 to the left. So that's x is less than or equal to 6, which is the opposite of what we want. So it's not A. Looking at B, we see the same problem. We bring this up. We bring this arrow up. It's everything less than or equal to 6. It can't be going to the left, so it's not B. We look at C. We bring it to our domain, to our x-axis. It's a line going to the right. That is indeed x is greater than or equal to 6. When we do it to our y-axis, we squish it over to the y-axis. The dot's at -4. The arrow comes over and is facing down, so it's a line going downwards. This would be y is less than or equal to -4. So we have y is less than, x is greater than, x is greater than. C is the answer. The problem with D is when we squish it over, it's actually going up. So that one would be y is greater than or equal to -4, not the one we want. Number 6 is simply asking for rate of change, which is slope. So on rate of change, we're trying to figure out how much it's growing by. In our y, it went from 17 to 24, which is +7. It went from 4 to 6, which is +2. We put change in y over change in x. That's 7 over 2. This part, there were a lot of students who got this answer and then in their griddable tried to put 7.2 or something along those lines. You cannot put a fraction in a griddable, so you have to turn it into a decimal. Type it in your calculator, hit Control Enter, and it gives you 3.5. Half of 7 is 3.5. On the next page, number 7, it asks us for what the x-intercept represents. We know this is the x-intercept. We look at the axis and see that it's named presentations made. So we keep on present 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, 4 time, 5 times, 6 times, and how many cookies they have left. We started at 180, and we go down every time we make a presentation. So that must mean when we're at 6, there are no more cookies. So it's the maximum number of presentations, 6, before running out of cookies, 0 cookies. So the answer was D. Number 8, Sam solved the following equation. Where do we see the mistake? We just work our way through the problem. -3 times 2 is -6. -3 times 1 is -3. So that's fine. That's fine. All this just got brought down, so all those are fine. On the next level, we see this was brought down, this was brought down, so both those are fine. Here's -6, here's +2. When we add a -6 and a +2, we should get a -4, but they just combined them as if they were both negative and got 8. So that's the error right there, which is in step 2. That's where the error showed up. So the answer is G. On the next problem, number 9, it tells us a function. We have f of b is equal to 12b, where b is bags. So we know however many bags we have is what b is, and it asks us for the domain, which is x. In this question, there's no x and y, but we know that this is y, this is x. The function, the output, is always our range, our y. So if domain is our x in this case, we know it's how many bags there are, and it's talking about bags of shoes. Real numbers and rational numbers, all of these numbers, real and rational, can include fractions. If we're talking about bags of shoes, we're not going to have half of a bag, we're going to have whole bags. So the answer is C, whole numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. 10 is another one that's simply asking for rate of change. That's how much it's growing by. From 60 to 180 is plus 120. From 0.5 to 1.5, it grew 1. So that's 120 over 1. That's as simple as it gets, 120. All right. Next question, number 11. The graph shows a function on the grid. It asks us for x and y intercepts. That's this, the x-intercept, and this, the y-intercept. The x-intercept is +3. X-intercept, the only one that has the right x-intercept is B. But we can also check the y-intercept is up there at 6, which is correct as well. B is the answer. Number 12 asks us to find the solution to an equation. Normally we distribute inside the parentheses, and we could here, but the reason we don't have to is because there's no variable in there. On the previous problem we did, it said something like x minus, so we had to distribute because we can't combine an x. But on this we can do what it says. 7 minus 2 is equal to 5. So that's inside the parentheses, bring everything else down. 3y plus 4. 5 times 5 is 25. 3y plus 4 equals. Now we're simply solving for the variable. How do we get rid of that 4? Right now it's adding, so to do the opposite, we subtract. 3y is equal to 21. Last step, the 3 is multiplying, so to get rid of multiplying, we divide. Y is equal to 7. The answer to number 12 was 7. Number 13 asks for what the range is of the function. The range of the function is y. So in this equation, we know this is x. We know the function is y. It's the output. So in this case, it's talking about quarters, represents number greater than or less than. So here's the key. It has to be greater than 3. So that starts with 4. 3 is not greater than 3. And less than 10. Less than 10 is 9. So it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Those are our x values. Those are the inputs that we can put into the equation, and then we get out an output. So if we put 4 in, 5 times 4, we're going to get out 20. Then if we plug in a 5 this time, 5 times 5 is 25. Then if we plug in a 6 this time, 5 times 6 is 30, and so on. The answer on that one is A. It wanted the outputs, so you had to plug in the inputs. Number 14, it just wanted the rate of change, which we know is slope. We see it started at 0, and then it doesn't really cross nicely until we get all the way up to here. So that's from 0 up to 160, plus 160, and then over from 0 to 20 is 20. So it rose 160, and it ran 20. So when we reduce that, we're going to see the zeros cancel, and that would just give us 8 as the answer there. All right. On the last page, we see number 15. It asks us which one models this equation. We know y equals mx plus b. B is the y-intercept, so that means the 2 is the y-intercept. So we look at our graphs. This does not have a y-intercept of 2, so A's out. B does have a y-intercept of 2. This does not have a y-intercept of 2. It has an x-intercept of 2, so C is out. 2 is the y-intercept on D, so it's between B and D. And then we look at the M, slope, whatever's in front of that. Some of you were stumped because it was a decimal, but you should know that 0.5 is equal to 1/2, so it's up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. This one went up 1, did not go over 2. We're having to, obviously, since it went from 2 to 4, think about 3, which is in the middle, and that only went 0.5 over. On this one, however, we go up 1, here's 3 in the middle, and then we went over 2, up 1 over 2. So the answer was D. It had a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of 2. Last one was another equation. So we're having to solve. We see parentheses with variables inside of it, so we have to distribute. 8 times x is 8x. 8 times -1 is -8. 10 times 2x, we have the equal sign obviously. 10 times 2x is 20x. 10 times -4 is -40. We have variables on both sides, so we want to get the two variables on the same side. Minus 8x minus 8x. -8 is equal to 12x minus 40. We want to get the variable on its own, so we get rid of this minus 40 by adding 40. Adding 40. 12x is equal to 32. Last step, we have to get the x on its own, so we divide, since currently that 12 is multiplying, the opposite's division. X is equal to both 32 and 12 divide by 4. So if we reduce it, we're going to end up with 8/3, and that's a positive 8/3. So the answer was F.